pastoral outcomes that I'm hoping for is not, primarily that seminarians are going to go out and talk to people point blank about some of these scientific aspects, but that they will learn really how to listen in a very careful way. A scientist often is looking at a set of data that conceal beneath them some truth or structure that is not necessarily obvious at the surface. That is exactly the same sort of skill set that a pastoral minister needs, to be in dialogue with someone who perhaps is expressing anger or fear or frustration, and then to learn not simply to take that surface interaction, but to listen what's underneath it, what's beyond it, how do you use the broad studies that any seminarian goes through to try and listen for the truth that's underneath the surface observations. So I really do believe that a well-trained scientist, when that's married onto faith, makes for a very effective pastoral minister.
So one of the pastoral outcomes is that students would be able to respond better to their parishioners. So they could answer the simple questions like, Genesis tells us one thing, and yet science is telling us something else, which is true. So students would have a better grasp of what's happening, first of all, where the question's coming from, and then how to relay that information in a helpful way. I'd also wish that the preaching that students have, in whatever way they do it, if they're lay students that preach as they're teaching, or if they're ordained students that will teach from the pulpit, they'll be able to pull in what's most on the parishioners' minds at the time, and that's often has scientific overtones to it. Do we have another planet? What's going on in the world? All of these things. Their parishioners have a more scientific training than they do for the most part. So to have that good relationship, on a gentle relationship with science, so that they can learn from it and then give that gift of their own education back to the people. That's one of the many things that I would hope for with this.
Well, I hope that the pastoral outcomes from the course are quite broad. Right now in the course, I have the privilege of teaching diocesan seminarians, a Benedictine monks studying for priesthood, as well as lay women. And I anticipate in the future to have that diversity of students, men and women preparing for various forms of ministry in the church, and who will have different roles touching hearts and souls. So many people have questions about the relationship of theology and science, faith and reason. And so for this reason, I think it's important that we equip all pastoral ministers, whether priest, deacon, consecrated, lay, single, married, whatever their state of life, to answer those difficult questions. And not that we have all the answers, but we can at least pass on the tradition that of which we are beneficiaries, the great reflection of the fathers of the church, of the medieval scholastics, of some of the modern thinkers, particularly in the post-Reformation period, and even in the 20th century.
I think it's important, as far as seminarians and then as priests, involvement with their people vis-a-vis the question of science. I think it's important to remember that priests don't become scientists by having a course in science. They don't become experts in things like natural family planning by having a component on natural family planning and a course on marriage and sexuality. What they hopefully do is acquire an awareness of how these things can relate to people's lives, recognize the areas of competence they possess, but also know when they need to refer. That is to say, when they need to involve other informed, competent lay people and professionals in the process of decision-making and even in forming, in the case of, say, preparation for marriage courses or courses that might be offered in the parish in regard to planning for retirement and even looking forward to the end of life. Priests do not have to know all the medical answers to these questions, but they do need to know where those answers can be found and how their people can adequately and quickly access them. And one of the amazing things that a lot of priests fail to realize is that they already probably have the resources within their own parishes. All they need to do is look around and they will discover people who are actively involved in palliative care, in OBGYN provision of services, and they'll realize that all they need to do is ask, and they'll discover that to their delight, people will break out in practically songs of joy at the opportunity to share what they know and what they've experienced in a way that allows the component of faith, the knowledge of theology, the ability to ask the important moral questions to then be followed up by the provision of answers that allows people to say, this kind of an approach is not non-scientific. This approach that the Church invites us to embrace is actually something that many medical professionals think is reasonable, and here are some of those people, and here are some of the websites you can go to get further information.